everyone in international education. I've had some really rewarding travel experiences, and I enjoy helping other people do the same. The places where I've spent the most time are West Africa. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Sierra Leone and also in France. I studied French and I taught English for a year at a university in France. I've traveled to a lot of other places, but those are the two places where I've lived abroad. And what you're getting ready to do as study abroad participants is it's not going on vacation. It's not really taking a trip. You're actually getting ready to live in another country. So. All right, so we have people going to a very wide range of places this semester. If you take a look at the PowerPoint slide, I believe that we have people going to all of the places that are listed there. So UR really sends people all over the world. Okay, Amy, will you go to the next slide, please?
If it will let me.
Okay.
Since it's being tricky with me. There we go.
All right. So I want to congratulate everybody on getting as far as you have in the process of going on study abroad. You've all made progress, but there's still more to learn and more to do. Some things that may need to be done if you haven't done them already are you may need to do an application for your partner institution. You will likely need to apply for housing, for a visa, and you'll need to register for classes. And there are procedures and requirements and deadlines for all these things. In some countries, you need to do a separate registration for your exams in addition to registering for your classes. Um, I just want to make sure everybody understands that UR can't get you extensions on the procedures of other institutions or of other countries' governments. So it's really important to read everything to make note of deadlines. If you don't understand something, be proactive in trying to figure it out. And then, of course, if you've done those things and you haven't found the answers that you need, then we're always ready to help. And sometimes it can seem that our office is asking a lot of you and that you're getting lectured if you don't adhere to deadlines and so on, but it's actually the experience that's demanding a lot of you. It's not our office. It's not really that you'll be in trouble with us if you don't follow procedures. It's more that you will have trouble of some kind uh, that you will need to work out with university administration in a different country or a landlord who may not speak English or foreign immigration officials or so on. So we're here to help and support you and guide you to the right resources and information. So tonight we're going to cover information that applies to everyone going abroad. For example, health, safety, sustainability, insurance, and intercultural competence. You will get more details about how these things apply to your specific program at the meeting that's focused on your program. And just a quick note that not all students will have a country or program specific meeting at UR because some of our providers like DIS and SIT will offer their own orientation. So we've worked hard to keep this presentation both concise and helpful. Please give us your full attention for the short time we need it. And we encourage everybody to take notes. And Amy, you can go on to the next slide.
I don't know why there it goes. Very long delay on this.
No worries. So one of the things that we want you to do is we want you to think about what you are hoping to get out of study abroad. And it's different for everybody. We understand that everybody has a different agenda. What we'd like you to do right now is to take about a minute and email yourself two hopes or goals for your study abroad experience. So just take a quick minute and send yourself a quick email, two things that you want to accomplish through study abroad. Might be language skills, it might be seeing new places, might be learning something about yourself. Everybody's got a different agenda. And I'll just be quiet for about 1 minute. There, I hope that's enough time for people to have written themselves a note with a couple of goals for themselves for study abroad. Amy, you can go on to the next slide. So, when you accept an offer from UR to take part in a study abroad program, you've agreed to follow some important UR rules. At least once before you go abroad, please open your Gateway record, go to Materials, and click on the form titled Participant Contract. This is a legally binding document, probably one of the first that you've ever signed, but you have all signed it if you were here tonight. Within that document are links to other documents. There's one called Agreement Waiver and Release Form. There's one called Behavior, Alcohol, and Drug Policy Guidelines. There is the Withdrawal Policy. And among the things covered in these documents are that you agree to follow UR rules on academics and conduct. You agree to follow the rules of your study abroad institution. In other words, you need to attend class, and if you don't, you understand that that's gonna be reflected in your grades. You need to take exams when they're scheduled. Um, you also agree to follow the laws of your host country, and you have to understand that they can be very different from U.S. laws. By going on these programs, you also agree to represent UR in a positive light. You agree to be respectful of your host culture, and you acknowledge that UR can't change the procedures or rules or laws of another institution or another country. And you also acknowledge that you are responsible for the consequences, whether they are academic, legal, or financial, of not doing these things. Um, so one thing that I think is important for people to understand is that study abroad is in some ways a lot like going to college. And if you think back to your first year, I'm sure that you will remember that some people handled the freedoms of college a lot better than other people. Some people, when you come to college, you're able to do adult things for the first time without somebody looking over your shoulder. And I'm talking about spending money, talking about drinking, talking about relationships. So if you look back on that first year, think of people who did those adult things in adult ways. They're probably people that you look up to. And if you think of people who did adult things in immature ways, they're the people that you don't look up to too much, and the people that found themselves in a lot of trouble. And study abroad is very much the same way in that it gives you the opportunity to do new adult things, to travel, to see new parts of the world, and to be much more independent than you've ever been. And you need to do those adult things in adult ways. So, all right, next slide, please. And at this point, Amy's going to talk a bit about academic concerns.
I am taking over, but I'm not sure that students see me in the little picture or not. I might just be a talking voice. My Zoom workplace doesn't show me. All I see is Chris. So if you see me, great. If you don't, that's fine too. So for academics, we just want to point out that one of the biggest myths that we hear for study abroad is that study abroad classes are just pass fail. We hear that an awful lot. And it's not the case. In fact, it's quite dangerous to think that, because if you take courses graded on a pass-fail basis, you will not receive transfer credit. UR requires that all classes taken abroad must be graded in order for you to receive transfer credit. So you do need to take your courses for grade. You also need to be registered for a full-time load in the system of the place where you're going. So with different credit systems, that may mean different things. But our website, the studyabroad.richmond.edu, each brochure page has basically a display of, under the academics tab, how those credits will transfer back to Richmond, and the number of courses that you need to take at each institution as well. So some institutions abroad do not keep track of this and don't have a minimum requirement. For example, Germany or Switzerland, but you are still responsible for making sure that you understand what is equivalent to that minimum load. It's 3.5 UR units. So most students will take between 3.5 and 5.5 UR units. That's considered full-time. I do notice an awful lot of students taking the bare minimum of classes. We understand they're doing it probably to travel, but it is very risky, because if you fail a course, for example, then you will not achieve that 3.5 unit minimum. And there is a chance for being placed on academic probation at Richmond for not achieving basically satisfactory academic progress. We can talk to you more in depth about that if you have questions, but I think it would be best for you to fall somewhere in the middle of the 3.5 to 5.5 line. We have an online database that can help you kind of look at your courses and how they can expect to transfer back. You've all probably met with an advisor for study abroad and talked about the study abroad course database. That's quite handy. One thing too, actually, before I talk more about that, is this bottom bullet is the first 5 transfer rule. So for students who are going to a place that has a 3-semester credit system, like DIS in Denmark, for example, or they have something kind of equivalent to that, where the mathematical conversion of the credit would come back as 0.9 UR units, because a unit is a different measure than most colleges use. They realized that students would have a shortfall if they were transferring a lot of credit from either that 3-semester credit system or that ECTS credit where the conversion would equal 0.9. So they actually give 5 free bump ups, they call it, in this first 5 transfer rule. So if you've already transferred in a lot of credit from another college, you may have already used your 5. But most of the students that I advise for haven't used these. And so when they go abroad, if they're going to a place where 0.9 is going to be the mathematical conversion, they'll get bumped up to a full unit, which is really great. Not all programs have that same system, so you've got to read your brochure page carefully. I know Galway and Ireland, for example, it's 0.75 for the courses. That's too far of a stretch for them to bump that up to a full unit. So talk to your advisor if you have questions about that. Okay, so in terms of academics, what's different when you're abroad? What we hear from most students is that there aren't as many exams, but they are more heavily weighted. So basically, it's a bit of a different system at most of our abroad partners, some more than others. If you're going on an affiliate program like DIS or CIE, you may have some courses that are taught in a very kind of Americanized way. But if you're doing a direct enroll exchange program, you may be in a different academic system. For example, some of them are quite unique. Maastricht in the Netherlands, for example, has this problem-based learning, very, very different for students to get used to. So it's just something to know and look into for each of your programs. But in general, if you're going on an exchange, you will have a different teaching experience. Classes are usually probably larger than they are at Richmond. Not across the board guaranteed, but in most cases. And you may not have as much individual interaction with your professor. So you may not find that they hold regular office hours, or they don't. Maybe there's not as much class participation as you're used to at Richmond. So you do need to be a bit more motivated. I always use my husband as an example here. He studied abroad in Germany, and he was living with all German students. And they just up and went to the beach in the middle of the semester. He was unsure how they were able to do that. I always say, don't get me wrong, he had plenty of fun, but he didn't go that week to the beach because he was unsure in that system what he needed to do to achieve the grades that he needed to get. Whereas those students had grown up in that system, they knew exactly what they needed to do to achieve the grades. So they felt that they could go up off to the beach for a semester, but he was a bit nervous about that. So it's just, different educational systems. You could potentially need to be more self-motivated because they're not necessarily going to be giving you, read chapter 7 tonight and tomorrow there will be a quiz. You might instead have a reading list, and that is what you need to stick to or use for your learning for the semester. So that's just something to be aware of, and be aware that there are different grading systems too. So don't be panicked if you get your first exam back in a place that has a different grading system and you got a score of, I don't know, 10. If it was 10 out of 100, that would not be a very good score. But the example that I'm using is Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. A score of 10 is actually quite fine there. So, different grading systems. We do indicate that on the academics tab of the brochure page for all of our programs as well. So you can check that in advance. Okay, so in terms of what transfers, so we already said it's not pass fail. you must achieve a grade of C or above. So the reason we say it's not pass fail is a D equivalent is passing. It's not failing. It's not a great grade, but it's it's essentially passing. But if you got the equivalent of a D on an abroad course, that would not satisfy Richmond's minimum for transfer credit. So it is C or above. So anytime you hear your friends say study abroad is pass fail, say no, it's C or above. You also can't have a duplicate course, so you can't take the same course and get credit twice, and it must be in a subject taught at UR. And that's in general. So, even if it's something like Scandinavian history and Richmond doesn't offer Scandinavian history, that's okay. We offer history, and that's close enough. All right. How does it count? Okay, so actually this is where I was supposed to talk about the database. I just had noticed something was wrong in my notes. That we must have moved that to its own slide. So how does it count? By default, your courses will come back as general transfer credit. So you will see that is as long as you meet those bullets on the prior slide. So must be taken for a grade, must get C or above, no repeat courses, must be in a subject at Richmond. So then you could get that general transfer credit as units toward graduation. But if you need a course to be something specific for a major or minor or field of study requirement, then that database that I was mentioning is a useful tool for that. So you can look there and see how courses you can take at that abroad institution have transferred. I would say do not pick your courses from the database. One of the issues that we're having with the database is it doesn't indicate which semester the courses are on offer. It doesn't indicate what prereqs you would need to take that class. It doesn't give that much detail. So you would use the catalog of your abroad program and pick your courses and then sort of double check those with the database. And if a student has already taken that course, and it's reflected in the database, then you can see how it has transferred in the past. If the class is not there, then what you do is the course approval process instead. These forms are available on the registrar's office website, easy to find. One thing that I'll note in case you're looking at these, you can tell they're hyperlinks, but since you're watching this PowerPoint on Zoom, you're not able to click those, and we don't have time to click them and walk through the whole detail for you, but you will be sent in the end, a little bit later in April, you'll be sent this recorded orientation, and you'll be given the PowerPoint. So you'll be able to actually see all the notes, you'll be able to click the links and follow that. So if you want to, make a mental note, oh, I'm going to loop back to that. You will be given that access later, a little bit later in April. Okay, course approval process, just a couple notes. You would need a syllabus to do that, and typically you will deliver the course approval form to the chair of the relevant department. There are a couple exceptions. I know that in computer science, for example, the chair has designated somebody else in the department as the person who does course approvals. So just follow along with what is required by your department. And business students, they will see Faye Bell in the Robbins School, and she will work to actually help get those courses transferred, even if she needs to reach out to an accounting professor or something like that. There's no deadline for the course approval. We get that question very frequently. So what is the timing for that? Most students probably are looking at around now-ish to be doing course approval. You've been approved for your program. It's pre-approval is highly recommended. And once it gets to summer, it can be a little bit harder to reach faculty. Now, this isn't possible in every case. In some cases, you are not able to register for your classes abroad until you get there. You can do a course approval once you get there, but again, it's a little harder to get in touch with Richmond faculty because they're probably also starting the semester here and they're pretty busy. So even in the case where you can't register until you get there, sometimes it's useful to just register for what you hope to be able to take, because you can get course approval for more courses than you actually are going to take, and have those kind of all locked in so that you have some flexibility when you get there if you need to change a course, drop a course, etc. All right, that is enough on academics, I think. Chris will chime in, I'm sure, with anything I missed, but we're going to change gears a little bit. completely to the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. So this is something that we've been trying to develop in our office. And to that extent, we already did a pilot program, and now we're fully launched on what we're calling Green Spiders Abroad. So a handful of students each year are basically nominated by faculty members, um, who are, students who are interested in sustainability, and they are going to go abroad as green spiders and do some kind of project while they're there. So if it's something like develop a guide for staying local, so that instead of flying off to different countries each weekend, the students in the future semesters can follow this guide that our green spiders will create for that site, on things that they can do to explore their local host culture. So they could rent a bike, maybe visit some museums, and all those details would be in that guide to help future students follow in their footsteps, essentially. So that's one sample project. Students can do other things as well. So if you are tapped to be a green spider, we hope that you will take us up on the offer. It's a really neat program. And if you are not, we hope that you will still find ways to be sustainable while you're abroad. All right, turning it back over to Chris.
Okay, I wanted to say something about sustainability, which is that when you go abroad, you see new ways of doing things. And I know that a lot of people are going to Spain. It's one of our most popular programs. And if you've been to Spain already, you've probably seen this. But so for those of you who are going for the first time, at some point you're going to see big tanks, big steel tanks up on the roofs of buildings. And those are for heating water. Spain is a warm, sunny country, and a lot of homes and a lot of apartment buildings have a steel tank on the roof that just absorbs the sun. That's full water, and that's how people primarily heat their hot water in some parts of Spain. Another thing that you'll see in Spain is a lot of drip irrigation. So if you have hedges planted or something like that, um, in a warm, dry country, they're not going to do very well unless they're watered. But people don't spray them with a hose or sprinkle them. There's usually a very thin water line that goes from plant to plant, and it's got a little valve beside each plant that leaks a certain amount of water, maybe like a 1 liter an hour or something like that. So there's really no waste. So when we go abroad, we have the opportunity to learn about how other countries do things. Maybe we can bring some of those practices back here. So this slide is about culture, and my study abroad colleagues and I realized that no two people have exactly the same goal for going abroad. Most of you are looking for some combination of academics and fun and travel and new experiences. But one of the main goals of me and my colleagues is that you will develop or deepen something called intercultural competence. And you can go to the next slide. So intercultural competence is something that exists on two levels. Um, we hope that you will gain this on two levels. What is it? So a definition borrowed from Dickinson College is the ability to communicate with, understand, and work with people of various backgrounds, values, worldviews, and behaviors. So on a very specific level, international educators like us hope that you will learn how to interact well with people from the place where you are studying. And from learning about one specific culture that is new to you, we hope that you acquire the general skills that will help you interact well with the many new cultures that you will encounter later in life. Next slide, please. So why is this important to us? Well, the world is more blended than ever. People travel across borders more, they migrate across borders more, they interact digitally across borders all the time. It's becoming increasingly rare to find a town, an employer, or any organization where everyone is of the same background. Intercultural competence helps us function better in these blended environments. Another reason is that it helps us to avoid cultural arrogance, such as assuming that people everywhere basically think the same as we do. And unfortunately, people from large, powerful countries like the United States are at a special risk of this. Cultural arrogance causes a great deal of unhappiness and conflict in the world. Another reason is that intercultural competence is assumed to be something that any truly effective professional is good at. Any truly effective professional should be able to interact well with people who are different from themselves. So for all those reasons, we hope that you will deepen your intercultural competence when you go abroad. And you could go to the next slide, please. So to know what it means to have intercultural competence, we first need to think about culture. What is culture? So one definition among thousands could be that culture is the set of assumptions that a group of people shares about life in the world. And a common metaphor that is used to describe culture is that of an iceberg, in that just like with an iceberg, part of it is above the surface and visible, but most is below the surface and not easy to observe or understand. For example, tourists in Paris often notice that local people sometimes pay no attention to them. Sometimes they don't even acknowledge them. That part of French culture is above the surface. Everybody sees that. But people who live in France come to understand why that is. The reason is that French people make a very sharp distinction between strangers and friends. They tend to have fewer friends and they develop very deep bonds with them, and they tend to maintain the same few friendships for life. So there's a big difference between being a stranger and a friend. But someone you don't know is just not a part of your life, and you don't extend any special courtesy to them. And it's not a malicious thing. That's just how it is. Next slide, please. So how do you develop intercultural competence? How can you have smooth interactions with people in your host country? There are some things that you can do before going abroad. For example, you can read a book that we're going to send to you. We're going to send you a book called Culture Smart. There's a separate one for each of your countries. It's an e-guidebook that we'll be sending to you, and it's a concise explanation of how things work in the country where you're going to study, how people think, and how all of that came to be. You can also watch intelligent TV about the place where you're going to study. Right now, I'm watching a series called Chef's Table, and it's about famous chefs, but it's about much, much more than cooking. You really learn a lot about the countries from those shows. Um, you could also talk with former participants and visiting students from the place where you are going. That's very important. And while you are abroad, there are a number of things that you can do. I think that one of the best things that you can do to learn about a new culture
Another pair
is to be
right now.
observant. I can hear somebody talking there. Make sure that you're muted, okay? Um, Listen and observe. A good thing to do if you're going to any of the Mediterranean countries is to hang out in a cafe. It's totally fine to linger for a couple hours over one cup of coffee, something like that. Just sit there, watch what happens around you. It's also important to use patience with yourself and the people of your host country, because there will be days when things don't go well, and when you're frustrated, when you feel that you're not understanding things, when you just want things to be the way that they are at home. But use patience. Things will get better. And also, I would say that it's important when you feel that way to stay engaged with local culture, even if it's difficult. There might be days when you just feel like staying in and not speaking French, for example. But I think that you will find that you will be happier with yourself if you have continued to try and you've not just stayed in and away from everybody else. And of course, it's important to maintain a sense of humor. But I think the very best advice that I have in terms of developing intercultural competence is you need to find a cultural informant. A cultural informant is somebody who understands both your home culture and the new one that you are experiencing. So, in my experience, the people who can teach you the most about a new culture are people from your culture who have lived in a new place for a long time, because they will have experienced the same misunderstandings as you, and they will be able to anticipate and explain the things that you will find confusing or problematic. And as an example, one time I was visiting a couple in Germany, and the man of the couple is German, and the woman is American. I was having dinner in their apartment. It was kind of a warm evening, and at some point, the man got up and he closed the window, And I just knew it would get stuffy, and I was kind of puzzled by that. And I asked him, why did you close the window? And he said, because there was a breeze. And I think the look on my face showed that I didn't understand. But his American wife understood this situation. She said, "Oh, he did that because there's an idea in Germany that a cool breeze will give you a sore throat or a chest cold." So without that piece of information, I would never have understood that interaction. So the American woman who had lived in Germany for a long time was better able to explain that aspect of Germany to me than a German person. So to summarize, it can be challenging to learn to navigate a new culture, but if you are intentional about it and if you use the tools at your disposal, it can work and that can be very rewarding. All right, you can go on to the next slide, please. So, when people go abroad, when people go abroad, they often see a lot of changes in themselves. I think that um, it can be a very good opportunity for learning about yourself when you find yourself in unfamiliar surroundings. Um, and who you are may feel different depending on where you go. It can be a positive thing or it can be very challenging. An example of a positive difference from travel would be that many of the best African American musicians and writers moved to Europe in the early 20th century because they were better respected there than they are here in their home country. They produced a lot of really excellent literature and music, especially jazz, in Europe. Another thing is that in many European countries, women have better protections and more rights than in the United States. For example, more paid maternity leave and things of that nature. So those are positive differences that people will see sometimes when they go abroad. And an example of a challenging difference is that in some countries, any sexuality other than being straight is a crime punishable by prison time or even worse. And in some places, belonging to a non-majority religious or ethnic group can come with preconceived stereotypes and discrimination. So differences like these are all the more reason for you to learn something about the country where you're going to live. Do research before you go to better understand how the country where you live sees issues like race, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender identity, nationality, social class, and so on. If you find that the place where you will be sees these things in a way that's going to be challenging for you, you should try to learn how visitors navigate these differences and where you can find any support that you might need while you're abroad. We encourage you to talk with a member of the Study Abroad team about any issues that concern you, and also to see our page on Identity Abroad, as well as the site of the SCEI. All right, and we can go on to the next slide, which is about health, and Amy's going to talk about that.
If I could get the next slides to go. I don't know why it's giving me such difficulty with changing slides, but anyway. All right, so part of having a good experience for study abroad is preparation. So that applies to thinking through the classes you want to take, how you will afford the experience, applying for the visa on time, and that also applies to health. So before you go, you should see your doctor, get any immunization updates that you need, discuss any medications you may need to take with you, get a general physical exam so you know you are starting the experience in a good state of health. So basically a little bit more on that is that when we go on to the next slides for our insurance, some of those basic routine things are not covered by the insurance. So you want to get that taken care of while you're or before you go abroad. You can also see your dentist for a checkup. And if you wear glasses, maybe consider getting an extra pair in case you lose or break yours. I just had a friend whose dog chewed up her glasses, so it does happen. Also, figure out how you will get the prescription medications that you may take. We will be uploading a document to your Gateway Abroad profile a little bit later this month, and it will have a document that talks about how to get your prescriptions abroad, how to make sure that a prescription that you'll be taking abroad isn't illegal in that country, that sort of thing. So you will also want to look at the CDC travel site for your country, we have the link there. And then this is an important one. Once you get abroad, find the nearest clinic or hospital while you're still healthy and feeling good. The worst time to try to figure out where you need to go when you're sick is when you're already sick and you're not able to think coherently. So check that out before you get sick, ideally. Also, in terms of mental health abroad, you should consider thinking in advance about how to take care of your mental health. If you're seeing a therapist, be sure to talk to them about the experience that you're about to have so that you can anticipate any situations that might be difficult for you. And again, back to medication, if you're taking any medication for a psychological condition, basically talk to them about how you will access it abroad, whether you will need a new prescription that you can have filled in country, or whether it's something that you can legally take with you, how you can get enough to cover a whole semester. And then while you're abroad, be sure to monitor your health, your mental health. Make sure that if you feel a little bit homesick, that's perfectly natural, but talk to people. Don't just clam up. If it's very normal as you're adjusting to a new country. So we hope that you will be open and honest about how you're feeling. There are a bunch of links here on this page. And again, we're going to be sending you this PowerPoint. So some of these things you can look into and have access to while you're abroad. So this timely care, for example, is new-ish at Richmond, and it is something that you can access while you're abroad. Also, this share your concerns link. This is because we hope that students are looking out for each other. So a student can convey a concern about another student if they notice somebody is not sleeping or not eating or not going out, not going to class, not leaving their room. They can share that concern so that Richmond can take some proactive steps. We can have our partners abroad do basically like a wellness check on students and make sure that they're okay. So that's something that we absolutely can do. And we do want students to be sharing with us if they're concerned about anyone else. The UR insurance we'll get into in the next slide. It does have coverage for psychological needs. So that is something you can get counseling abroad. There can even be hospitalization for any mental health concerns. So that is good news that you will be covered while you're abroad. Okay, so let me move the little chat window because it's covering part of the text here. So we currently, the policy that Richmond buys for all students going on semester year study abroad is a very good one. We use, it's basically an insurance company, and there's also an assistance company that goes with it. We are switching to a new assistance company coming up very soon. We felt confident enough about this switch to go ahead and put it on the slide. So a lot of the forms and details on the website currently now talk about this AXA or AXA, I call it, AXA Assistance, and we'll be switching to IMG. So we found that we thought that they would offer a bit better service to students. So one of the things that we do is we sign up all students for this coverage. It is valid worldwide except for your home country. So if you're a US citizen going abroad, you'll have coverage in all the places that you travel to. So your host country, but also if you travel to other countries. But if you come home for any reason, then you would not have coverage here at Richmond. So most commonly students do not let their home insurance lapse while they're abroad. Most of our students only study abroad for a semester. So you don't want to, try to save a few dollars by canceling that insurance while you're abroad because you could run into pre-existing condition clauses or something like that. And also if a student comes home unexpectedly during the semester, they want to make sure that they have coverage here as well. So it may be that you end up double or even triple covered because some of our programs also provide insurance. So while the Richmond policy for study abroad students comes free of charge to you, it's automatically included. You may find that if you're in a certain program, like CIE, for example, CIE also has a mandatory insurance that we can't get our students out of. And so that CIE will charge to students. So you would have potentially your regular US coverage, your study abroad policy that Richmond covers for you, and a CIE policy that you have to pay. And there are a few others like that. Not a ton, but a few. Okay, so back to our insurance, which is the focus here. It does cover things like doctor's visits, etc. And the way that it works is that you would have a charge and then you would pay it essentially and then submit receipts to the insurance company to get reimbursed. That is basically how it works. Um, it also has medical evacuation coverage. So, for example, if you were so severely injured that you needed to be treated in another country, it could, medevac you or whatever to the nearest country that can treat you adequately. So it doesn't mean they'll fly you all the way back to the US, for example. If you're a US citizen, it'll just fly you to the nearest place where you can be treated successfully. It also has this great family reunion benefit where if you are hospitalized for more than 24 hours, they will fly a member of your family to be at your bedside, which is a really great service. So if something like that happens, be sure your family understands the insurance as well, because the insurance company must make that booking. So, you get hit by a bus or something like that. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But if it does and you're in the hospital, your parent can contact the insurance company. The insurance company will make the flight arrangements to get them over there to be by your bedside. Um, so there's also things like trip cancellation or trip delay or trip interruption. So be sure to look through the policy. It's posted on our website, and you can review those details now. Again, before you need help, it's good to just have a general idea of how that insurance works. All right, if I can get this, like press every button to get it to switch, and we'll turn it back over to Chris.
Okay. When you're on study abroad, we it's very important to us for everybody to stay safe. Your well-being is the most important thing to us, and and it would be impossible and unhelpful to list every conceivable hazard that you could encounter while you're abroad. But what I want to do now is just hopefully make you think a little bit about things that you need to learn in advance. What we hope is that you will educate yourselves from Culture Smart, from a good cultural informant, maybe from the websites of the CDC and the travel advisory pages of the State Department, about what goes on in the country where you're going. And then with that information, we hope that you can make good choices about what you do and where you go while you're on study abroad. And so you need to think about two categories of things. The first is you shouldn't do things abroad that you wouldn't do at home. Don't mentally go on vacation because the world is not a gated resort. And I think we all need to acknowledge that UR is not exactly a normal part of the United States. There's very little concern about crime of any kind here, very little violence. Um, so any place where you are going probably has a higher rate of crime than the UR campus. So the second category of things that you need to think about are things that are not the same as in your home country. So um, UR sends people to places where the safety landscape um, is sometimes very different from what it is here. Um, in some cases, environmental factors could be different. So if you are going to Switzerland or if you're studying in Europe and you might go up into the mountains, then altitude can be an issue. In some places, there are serious diseases that are carried by mosquitoes, like people who are going to Ghana. We have some people who are in Ghana this semester, or if you're even going to the northern part of Australia, there are some pretty serious mosquito-borne diseases there. For anybody who's going anywhere in the tropics, then there are diseases that are borne by food and water. Got to be careful of those things. And people who are going to countries that are as safe in many ways as Japan and New Zealand need to be aware that those countries are seismically active, that they have earthquakes. So, um, so those are things that those are things that you need to know about. You're going to places where those things are parts of life, and you need to be ready for those. Some societal factors can be different too. For example, um, I know that we have students going to Singapore, And Singapore is a country that has very, very strict laws. It's a very clean, neat, and orderly society. But if you step out of line in some ways, the punishments are very harsh. For example, they have the death penalty for a pretty wide range of drug laws. If you're going to Thailand, we have one student who's going to Thailand in the fall, and that person needs to understand that in that country, speaking ill of the king or saying anything negative about the king or any member of his family is a crime, and you can be put in jail for that. We have a lot of people who are going to the UK, and people going to the UK need to understand that carrying a pocket knife in that country will get you arrested. Um, so, so again, societal differences can make a difference to the safety landscape. All right, on to the next slide, please. So we've talked about how it can be beneficial to think ahead about academics and cultural differences in health, and it's the same for safety. It would be good to use resources like the State Department travel pages uh, and um, and the CDC pages to learn about safety conditions and health conditions in the places where you're going to go. But also, it would be good to figure out which hospital, which police station, and fire station are closest to where you live, and how you would call for help if you were in need of help in the country where you're going to study. There's a U.S. government program for U.S. citizens called STEP, S-T-E-P, Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. And that's an online registration where you can tell the U.S. government where you're going to be. And that way, if there's any kind of a problem in that place, they can notify you of the problem. Or if things get really bad, they know where to start looking for you. Um, we would also encourage you to provide your contact info in the appropriate place in your gateway record so that we can contact you if we need to. And we've had to do this a number of times. We've had to get in touch with people a number of times in recent years. And about 10 years ago, there was a really bad mass shooting and bombing incident in Paris. And we had a number of students there, and we learned a lot from that incident. Luckily, no UR students were injured, even though hundreds of people in France were injured. When we started making calls to try to get in touch with people, we realized that of the 6 students who were studying in Paris that semester, uh, only one of them was even in France. Everybody had gone away for the weekend. But we also learned as we continued making calls that there were 13 people, 13 other UR students who were studying elsewhere in Europe who had gone to Paris for the weekend when this attack took place. So what that showed us is that when there's some kind of a problem like that, we have to get in touch with a very wide range of people. We have to cast the net pretty wide to make sure that we get everybody. So please enter your contact information when you have that, when you know which phone you're going to be using and when you know what your physical address is going to be. Please enter that information so that we can help you and so that we can help your families in case they're trying to locate you. We would also encourage you to carry your insurance card with you, your emergency contact card, which is something that you'll be getting later in the semester, and make sure that you have the insurance company's phone number and the emergency phone numbers of the country where you are going to be in your phone. And also think in advance about who you will call if you find yourself in an emergency situation. First, we would hope that you would call the right emergency number for your situation in your country. Then call your local study abroad program staff because they're going to be able to help you pretty quickly. Call the insurance company and then call someone at UR after that. Call the UR police non-emergency number 24 hours a day. They always know how to reach study abroad staff. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. So here's some specific things that we want to make sure you're thinking about. Um, so when you go on study abroad, the single biggest thing you can do to preserve your well-being is to limit your consumption of alcohol because most of the injuries, sexual assaults, and other crimes that occur while people are abroad are influenced in one way or another by alcohol. And of course, stay away from illegal drugs because the penalties are so bad in some places, and because you never know what you're getting when you buy some pill from some guy in some club. Um, Driving is dangerous abroad as it is here. We really don't want you to drive while you're abroad. Just too many opportunities for getting hurt and finding yourself in legal or financial trouble. Need to say something about water sports. Every year, a small number of U.S. students die while on study abroad. Richmond has only ever had only one student die while on study abroad, and that person drowned. Drowning is the leading cause of death among study abroad students. So if you are doing anything having to do with the water, if you're going to be at a place with a beach, if you're going to try scuba diving or parasailing or something like that for the first time, or sailing, just be aware that the water is the leading cause of death among study abroad students. Be careful about that. And I will add that it's not necessarily being at the beach that's dangerous. It's really anything having to do with water. The UR student who um, died in Rome. He drowned in a canal. He was not even a student in Rome. He was a student in the Czech Republic, and he was visiting friends in Rome and had an accident and drowned in a canal. Another thing to think about is pickpocketing. If you've been to Europe, you've probably been warned about this, maybe seen it happening. Pickpocketing is very common in all big cities, but it's especially common in the Mediterranean countries of Europe. Pickpockets tend to prey on people who are not paying attention. So remember this if you're watching a street performer or admiring the Mona Lisa or having an intense conversation on your phone in a public place. Please make every effort not to lose your passport because it's a hassle to get it replaced, but also be aware that stolen passports end up in the hands of criminal organizations. So if it gets stolen, it's probably going to be eventually sold to a terrorist organization or a human trafficking organization, something like that. It's kind of an ethical obligation to taking care of your passport. Also be careful with credit cards and ATM cards. There's just as much fraud with those things as there is here. And I would also encourage you to think about the kind of public transportation that you choose, because in many countries you have multiple options and some are safer than others. In some countries, there are official taxi cabs and there are unofficial taxi cabs, and the unofficial taxi cabs have an especially bad reputation. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, unfortunately, sexual assault occurs everywhere, including the places where UR students study abroad. In order to lower your chances of being a victim, you need to be aware of two sets of risks. One set of risks is the same as here. To protect yourself while abroad, you need to use the same normal, healthy caution that you would in your home country. Don't think of yourself as being on vacation. Just because you are abroad doesn't mean that you should do things differently. You shouldn't trust somebody too soon. You shouldn't make yourself too vulnerable with alcohol or drugs. Don't leave a drink unattended. Don't be out alone late at night. Don't leave a party or a club with somebody you just met, and don't let your friends do those things either. So another set of risks comes from being in a new place. So to protect yourself from these risks, you may need to do some new things. One is that it's important to learn about local scams that can lead to sexual assault. In some places, getting into the wrong kind of taxi can be dangerous. In other places, there's a lot of drink spiking. 3 or 4 years ago in London, women at bars were getting pricked with needles that had been dipped in GBH. So it's important to talk to local people, especially local women or people that you identify with, and see what they are saying about staying cautious. It's also important to understand that men in other countries often assume that American women are easy because they're portrayed that way in American media. Another thing to think about is that you should try not to present yourself as a short-term visitor because aggressive men in some places target women who they think of as tourists because they think that a tourist is more likely to just leave town after being assaulted instead of staying there and pursuing criminal charges. Another thing on this topic is that it's important to educate yourself on the laws of your host country that relate to sexual behavior. There are some surprising differences from one country to another, and some may contribute to the prevalence of sexual assault. For example, in some places, a person cannot be charged with rape unless they've used violence or intimidation to commit the act. So having sex with a person who is unconscious is not considered a crime. For all these reasons, it's a good idea to ask the advice of people you identify with who have spent time in the country where you will study. And if you are the victim of an assault, please be in touch with a member of UR's study abroad office with whom you feel comfortable and with the local staff of your program. We will want to get you all the help we can. Next slide, please.
Okay, I think it's back to me. So we have made it pretty far in this presentation. We've warned you of some safety issues, and now we want to get you ready to prepare to fly out. So the day you leave for your study abroad experience, we want it to be a happy one, not one filled with stress because your visa hasn't arrived. We've had that happen before with a few students who had to delay their departure because their visa didn't make it in time. So starting right now, if you haven't already, I know we have a lot of students already working on this. Getting a visa or residence permit for the country where you will study is sort of job number one. Apply as early as you can. In some cases, there is such a thing as too early, where you can only apply so far in advance. But you'll be getting, if you haven't already, visa instructions, either from your program or from our office. And that's something that we'll work on essentially, as we hope to get you ready. If you are hoping to travel abroad over the summer, for example, that may be complicated if you have a visa for your abroad program for the fall. So it's a time that could be tricky because if you're needing your passport for the summer travel and your passport is needed to get the visa stamp for your fall travel, that can be a tricky timeline to navigate. So be sure you're talking with your study abroad advisor about that they know what your plans are for this summer. Okay, a couple other things. So thinking about things like luggage allowance, make sure that you don't pack too heavy. I know I am 100% guilty of that. But I would also not want to pay extra for overweight luggage. So it's a delicate balance. Know what is prohibited in your host country. So the example we gave here was Claritin D in Japan. Again, the document that we'll be uploading about prescription meds that we'll be uploading to Gateway by the end of this month, that will have some guidance and tips for you about medications that may or may not be legal in the country where you're traveling. And then a couple of things to carry on your person, not to put in your luggage. All those important documents like your passport with its visa, medications, and make sure the medications are in the original bottle, not in some baggie or something like that. It's a good idea to have a written prescription as well for any medications that you're bringing. Your acceptance letter, things like that, in case you're questioned crossing the border. And then arrival instructions and addresses. This is really, I find it mind-boggling that every semester virtually I will have a student who somehow forgot to, prepare in advance their arrival details. And so they, in all their excitement, they packed everything up and then they land. Maybe they're tired, they've been flying all night, they've got all their luggage, and they realize they don't know where they're actually supposed to go. So if they're not on a program that has airport pickup, because not all of them do, they may need to navigate to a place where they can get their key for their housing, something like that. Some students might rely a little too much if there's a buddy program at their program, which we highly encourage you to sign up for if your program does have a buddy program where someone would meet you at the airport to help you out. But what if your flight is delayed or your buddy sleeps through their alarm clock? So it's always best to have backup arrival instructions as well. The worst thing is to arrive in country, dragging your luggage, not knowing where to go, and feeling pretty frustrated and down. So planning in advance can definitely help you avoid that scenario. So good news in terms of planning for your flights and all of that is that Richmond does currently have a travel allowance available to students for study abroad. It happens automatically. You don't need to apply for it. You don't need to be aid eligible, but every student currently going on a Richmond semester or year study abroad will receive $1,000 credit per semester. So if you're going for a year, you get 2,000. That will be applied to your Richmond account as a credit. It's not quite as slick as if we gave you a check and said, here, go buy your flight. It's just a boring old credit on your Richmond account, but it's still great. You still get the money. So basically, they'll charge Richmond tuition and then subtract off $1,000. Um, so that's really great. Some students do receive an additional 500. So for example, a student who has work study, we can't force our partners overseas to put students to work. So we can't really transport the work study program. So those students get a little bit of extra money to help make up for that. Also, students who receive need-based loans, I believe, are eligible for that as well. So if you have questions, reach out to the financial aid office. And we're actually going to provide a great opportunity for you to learn about these things from the financial aid office. It's actually happening tomorrow. So Tuesday, April 8th, 4:15. It might not go as far as 5. We usually are pretty quick. And it's in Richmond Hall Room 108. But we say don't miss class to attend that session because while it's great information, we can send you the PowerPoint. A number of students have already been in touch with me in advance when I sent out the invite for this event to please send them the PowerPoint. I'll be doing that soon, knowing that they couldn't attend. That way they can get some of the information. You can also at any time go and talk to the financial aid staff. They're quite friendly and they're very in the know about how study abroad works. So that's great news. All right, and then if I could get the slide to advance. I don't know why it's giving me such trouble. Maybe my key for it, like on my keyboard is maybe a little bit, my computer's not the best top quality. So, all right, withdrawal and cancellation. So this is a sad slide because we hope nobody will have to withdraw, but it does happen. We have already had a number of students withdraw, and then over the summer, we usually will have a few more. We call it summer melt, where students may end up having to withdraw because maybe something changed in their circumstances, in their family, in their health, in their academics. It's okay, but just know that there could potentially be financial ramifications depending on where you are at in the stage of your abroad planning. If you've already put down a housing deposit on an apartment or something like that, that's going to vary quite widely depending on which program you're going on. But if you do need to withdraw, please see our withdrawal policy page and share it with your family as well. So we do often waive the fee that we could theoretically charge you. There is a withdrawal fee, but we're not cruel people, so we will waive it if we can, but we cannot always do so if we're going to face financial penalties from the abroad partner. So just be aware of that and be in communication with us. There is I will say the worst scenario is if you go all the way abroad, start your program, and then withdraw. That usually is going to carry the highest penalty. So to that end, there is something called a tuition protection insurance. Because of our exchange program agreements, sometimes once you arrive, it's considered like you've used that exchange slot. So it's used that tuition credit essentially. So having something like that tuition insurance can help with that. And there are links on our website for that as well. Okay, well, so what's next? Read everything that your study abroad advisor and that our office puts forward to you. We hope that you're paying attention to deadlines, and we will try to help you as much as we can on that, but we don't always send multiple reminders about things. So you will need to mark things on your calendar and be responsible for following up. I already mentioned several times that we'd be posting this Zoom recording and the PowerPoint and some other helpful documents to your Gateway Abroad file. And that is probably all I have, but I would like Chris to have an opportunity to give you his final thoughts.
Sure. Thank you for your attention. If anybody is thinking of withdrawing, I wanted to say that I've had several people over the course of the years come in and talk to me about that. They've said, I think I need to withdraw. And I would say that probably a third of the time that people have said that to me, there's something that they have misunderstood about costs or about timing or something like that. And we've been able to find a pretty good solution that allowed them to still go on study abroad. So um, if you have questions or concerns, if you're worried about something, don't keep it to yourself. Come in and talk to us, and we will try our best to clear things up for you. Um, so other than that, I would say again, thank you for your attention, and we hope that you have a wonderful time abroad, a very rewarding time.
Thank you very much.